but more recently, the last few years, are all starting to kind of come together. $1 trillion of debt added in 100 days, and record deficits, no spending restraint by Congress, the approval of the
Meet Lawrence Lepard, a staunch advocate for sound money and a passionate Bitcoin enthusiast. As an investment manager at Equity Management Associates, he has a robust background in managing gold stocks and has long been an advocate for sound money principles. For decades, Lepard has been advising investors to hedge against the constant debasement of fiat currencies by investing in gold. However, with the emergence of Bitcoin, his mission has found renewed vigor. Lepard sees Bitcoin as a superior alternative, often likening it to digital gold, offering robust protection against fiat debasement and a plethora of other valuable qualities absent in traditional gold investments. In a recent interview with Natalie Brunell, Lepard shared an ultra-bullish price prediction for Bitcoin, foreseeing a future where the leading cryptocurrency could potentially be valued in the millions per coin. His bullish outlook stems not only from the ongoing debasement of fiat currencies, but also from escalating concerns, particularly highlighted by recent events in 2024. Lepard referenced President Biden's staggering $7.3 trillion budget proposal and ISA's urgent letter to key financial institutions, urging targeted reforms to address mounting concerns over America's debt crisis. Lepard emphasizes that these developments serve as critical indicators of an impending worsening of America's debt situation, potentially surpassing even the grim estimates by the Congressional Budget Office. Now let's delve into excerpts from Lepard's compelling interview with Natalie. But before we proceed, we kindly ask you to support our channel by liking this video, subscribing, and activating post notifications for more insightful content. Thank you and enjoy the video.
And the multiplier impact that's had on the price of Bitcoin. And as we know, it's kind of been a relentless uptrend, strong and up to the right since 50,000 when the ETF was approved. And, there's another thing, probably a lot of people didn't focus on it, but I did, and it's a big deal. There was a letter from the Industry Swaps and Dealers Association to the Federal Reserve saying, hey, you know what, we really think you ought to throw away this SLR, this limit that you place on the banks and their ability to buy Treasury debt. And of course, the reason for that is that there's a lot of Treasury debt to be sold and the number of buyers are slowly but surely shrinking. And if you really read through the lines on that carefully, and it's a lot of inside baseball and monetary plumbing, it's more or less kind of QE infinity, or it'll give the banks the ability to just in an unlimited way, monetize the debt and put it on their balance sheet because they don't have to count it as reserve. And so they can more or less print money to buy the government debt. So it hasn't been approved yet. It was a letter, but it's clearly those kinds of things. They start with a letter and then they come with a Federal Reserve proclamation that this is what we're going to do. And they did it in 2020. And they did it in 2020 because at that point in time, they needed to do it because they were having a hard time selling the debt then as well. So to me, it's a big deal. And I'm not sure the market's fully absorbed it, although, you could also argue maybe the market has absorbed it because the two sound money assets, gold and Bitcoin, are both at record highs or, very close to. Gold's backing off a bit today, but gold had been constrained within a range of kind of a $2,100 top, $2,050, $2,100 top, and it broke through that rather decisively in the last couple of weeks. So, I think the wider world is awakening to the issues that many of us in this area have been talking about for some time, and that is that we have a sovereign debt problem, and that the likelihood is that the solution of the government will be to monetize it, and that goes to the letter I just referred to. So that's kind of the climate we're in, and I kind of see the sky as the limit for both of these assets. I expect they'll be higher in a month, and I expect they'll be much higher in 6 months. So, well, that's right. I mean, and this is why we've often said it's kind of they're trapped, right? And we know that when they're trapped, that the default condition is always print more money, print or go burr. Biden is talking about trying to tax the rich. The increase in the total budget size is enormous. I mean, I was reading something in the Wall Street Journal this morning talking about how the whole budget was really a fantasy because a lot of what he's projecting just isn't realistic. I mean, I find it amazing that the CBO is projecting not that great an outcome for the next 5 or 10 years. And they're saying there won't be any recessions in a 10-year window. And they think that inflation and interest rates are going to go back to 2 or 3%. And, I'm like, what planet are these people living on? So, yeah, we live in a financial fantasy world, really, that these people have kind of constructed. But, there are some free markets. Probably Bitcoin is the freest of all the markets in terms of, lack of manipulation. And guess what? They get it. I mean, Bitcoiners get it, and people are getting it, and they're saying, okay, if you're going to debase my currency, I'm going to buy a currency that by definition cannot be debased above and beyond the programmatic formula. So, and this is why Bitcoin's at new all-time highs, and I expect it's going to go much. Surprise me. I mean, they'll be looking. I remember there was some talk. I mean, Bernie Sanders and others were talking about trying to tax, billionaires just on unrealized gains or on their net wealth. And look, a political system which is failing, which needs money, is going to, they're going to flail around and try and get money wherever they can. And so I think it's certainly one of the risks with Bitcoin. I will say one thing. I respect Michael a lot, and I think he's right that it is property. But it actually could, over time, it could become more than that. I'm not sure if he believes this or not, but I actually believe it will ultimately become the base layer of money, because it will be a form of money that's the characteristics of which are so superior to the alternative, which is the dollar. The dollar will fade into existence, and we'll have sats will be the new basis of the monetary system. But admittedly, that could be many, many years out, and I might be getting ahead of this and listening to this, that they take the time to really study Bitcoin and understand it at a deep level. Because, one of the things, I mean, we all try and orange pill people, and sometimes I think we forget when we're orange pilling them to help them to understand how volatile it can be. As a perfect example is, if you were orange pilling people a couple of years ago, and this, when it was in the 50s and 60s, and then it dropped to 15. I mean, I had some friends who, when it dropped to 15, they thought they, made a mistake and they sold it. And that was the wrong thing to do. And I think, people need to look at the history of the asset, understand that, it's higher highs, higher lows, but there are big drawdowns. And so, you don't want to use a lot of leverage with this asset because of these drawdowns. And you want to, in general, aim to more dollar cost average as opposed to plop buy. And so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you need to sell your Bitcoin when the price of Bitcoin is on a drawdown. Because I think everybody who's been in Bitcoin for more than 4 years, generally speaking, you gain purchasing power. Yeah. But sometimes, in that cycle, you would lose purchasing power if you bought it and a year later it had fallen. So I would just caution everybody to understand the nature of the asset, and to think to understand it deeply enough such that if there is a drawdown, you won't be tempted to sell, because in fact, what you should be doing is buying that drawdown, not selling it. I think everybody needs to be prepared to deal with the volatility, and everybody needs to think long term. And because long term, I'm quite confident that this is going to be a multi-million-dollar per coin asset. And so if you're buying it at 72 today, you're feeling. I mean, it feels like you're paying too much, but I one of the great stories from Madeira. Somebody told me they knew Max pretty well. I guess when Max was buying his first coins, he paid. This is Max Kaiser. He was paying 50 cents.
With nearly $200 trillion in funded and unfunded debts, coupled with a debt-to-GDP ratio exceeding 120% and rapidly escalating interest expenses, it's evident that the United States is hurtling down an unsustainable fiscal path. This phrase, unsustainable fiscal path, is precisely how the U.S. Department of the Treasury described the situation in the executive summary of the fiscal year 2022 financial report. Macro analysts and notable investors, spanning from the traditional financial sector to alternative arenas like Bitcoin and gold, have been sounding the alarm about the looming debt crisis for years leading up to 2022. Despite this, policymakers had the luxury of brushing aside the issue, thanks to artificially low interest rates. They painted a picture of stability, masking the underlying fragility of the financial system. However, that illusion has shattered. Today, the cracks in the system aren't just visible. They're glaringly obvious, with institutions that once endorsed reckless monetary policies now compelled to acknowledge the severity of the situation. A poignant example is Chairman Jerome Powell's admission that the U.S. is on an unsustainable trajectory, emphasizing the urgent need for policymakers to engage in earnest discussions about the way forward. What are your thoughts on Lepard's interview? We invite you to share your comments and observations in the section below. Don't forget to show your support by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and activating post notifications for more content like this. Thank you for watching.